We got model, actress, supermom, weekly contributor to Liquid Lunch, Zen Sam's on the line. Hey, Zen, sorry, we got all kinds of mayhem going on over here, but it sure looks,
Okay.
it doesn't look like you need any beauty treatments. You look like you're shined up perfectly there.
Yeah, she looks
You
okay.
know, I do my best.
No, well, you look great. Frank said you look okay, by the
Yeah,
way.
she does. She looks okay.
Oh, Frank, he's a hardcore. He's a tough sell.
No doubt about it. Well,
Oh.
all girls who ever reject him, he then turns on them quickly, you know?
No,
Oh, I see you got your hair blowing in the wind like a true model.
I'm on my
No.
balcony, so you know it is what it is.
Well, Zen, it's great to have you back in New York. Let's talk about what's going on in the country. Obviously, yesterday was this social media blackout where apparently you were supposed to put up a black square or just a blackout image on Instagram or other social media platforms to, I guess, show that you're down with the struggle. Give me your take on what we saw yesterday and what impact that's going to have on race
Well, I mean,
relations
yes-
going forward.
Yeah. Yesterday, the music community led an effort to pause normal business operations in observance of the longstanding racism and inequality that exists, and they called it Blackout Tuesday, a day essentially promoted by activists to bring out policy change and, you know, in the wake of the death of George Floyd. But the movement has spread on social media where organizations and individuals are posting solemn messages featuring these stark black backgrounds, tagging the posts with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And here's the problem. While these posts may be well intended, posting a blank black image with a bunch of tags clogs up critical channels of information and updates. And right now, protests are still raging across our country.
Yeah,
And visibility for different groups and activists are key right now. So one of the most common ways to keep track of all of this is by monitoring and searching the tags. So posting an all black image essentially does more harm than good to keep people updated. So it comes at a time when voices of black activists and advocates are needed the most.
No doubt. Hey, Zen. Hey,
Yeah.
Zen, I've recounted this before, but when my kids were younger, I started teaching them that everyone's the same, and it doesn't matter what color they are or what sex they are. We're all
Right.
one human people under one higher power, let's call it, right? And I used to say, no matter what your friends say, no matter what you hear, those people, you can refer them as one thing. Their nation of origin, they're African American, okay? And there's no other term to use with them. And in one instance, we were online for the Small World in Disney World, and there was an African American family right behind us, and my kids were like 7 and 5. And my daughter starts pulling on my shirt, said, Daddy, Daddy, out loud, Daddy, Daddy, are those the African Americans? And she was doing what I taught her. And I kind of looked at the guy who was the father of the other family, and he looked back at me and he nodded his head like, you're teaching your kids right. Because, you know, my kids knew. What are some tips for teaching and talking to kids about race?
We have to start early. By 6 months of age, babies are noticing racial differences, and that's a fact. By age 4, children have begun to already show signs of racial bias. So I let Alexa know that it's perfectly okay to notice skin color and talk about it and talk about race. I always encourage Alexa to ask questions, share her observations, be respectfully curious about race, and I've always exposed her to different cultural opportunities. So I'm very mindful of these things, and I started at a very young age. What kids hear from us is less important than what they see us do. So the diversity of our friendship circle, for example, is likely to have a bigger impact. That's extremely important. I always choose books and toys that include people of different races and ethnicities. I started visiting museums with exhibits by the time she was 18 months old, whether it was Native Americans, African Americans, Latino, Asians. I started very early on. And I always say, face and know your own bias. I let her see me and acknowledge and face my own biases. We're less likely to pass on the biases we identify and work to overcome. So that's also extremely important, right? Aiming to develop cultural literacy, by understanding and respecting others and their background. So these are extremely important things, especially living in New York City, in the tri-state area, where we're a melting pot. When I asked Alexa to describe the children in her class, some of them are Asian, some of them are African American. She never once mentioned their skin color. She skipped right over that part. To her, she sees no color. She sees no color. So this.
All right. Well, so in Minnesota now, the school board has actually terminated its contract with the police department because I guess they don't feel that the police department is using the right procedures and protocols, the right training. What does this mean for kids? Are they less safe now?
Well, it shows that meaningful change is possible, and school board members across the country, not just Minnesota. We're talking about districts including Arizona, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Washington, Illinois, and even New York have also reached out, in support of crafting similar resolutions, and they want the police force omitted out of, their, keeping the children safe. The question is, how will it be replaced, and who will replace watching over our children? And quite frankly, right now, I've lost a lot of faith in the way that things have happened, especially with the police force. So, I understand that they've taken these measures, especially for the Black students and the racial students that no longer feel protected by our police force, and righteously so. And I think that right now they're going to have to find alternative ways, but I think it's going to be at the top of their list. It's going to be a priority with the new school year, and I feel that they're going to replace that in a very adequate way, whether it's a private sector security, whether they're going to work with, government or other authorities. But I think that if this is a step in the right direction, because if our voices are going to actually be heard, then drastic measures like this need to be taken so we can, pave the way for our children not to grow up with these kind of racial biases and governed by these ideologies that just do not make any sense for humanity any longer.
Well, Zen, I have some questions about that survey or that data that shows that children are already showing racial bias at the age of 4. But in the final 30 to 45 seconds that we have here, my concern about all these social media efforts to put a black square up or something like that is there a danger that people actually think they're doing something by sharing something on social media or putting on a certain image, when in actuality they're really not doing anything to change the fate of Black America or anybody's fate?
I think this is going to get to, I think all of this is dangerous, Frank. All of it is dangerous because none of it is done in calculated ways. It's all reactive. And when you are functioning from a place of just impulse and reacting to a hot situation without thinking things through, and now we're forced to explain to these young children what's going on. Not only is there a pandemic happening, but all of a sudden there's so much hate and so much divide in our world. They were feeling unsafe to begin with coronavirus, and now you have all these children going, our city's being burned down. What's happening? Why is there so much hate? So I do think, violence breeds violence, hate breeds hate, and all of this is at a flood. It's coming in a flood kind of way where everybody's plastered to the TV, and the only thing we haven't heard in the last 4 days is about coronavirus.
Look, we got to leave it there, Zen. Thank you so much. You look,
very welcome,
you
guys.
look darling. I'm glad to have you back in New York, and we need you back in studio. Jen joined us today. We should have you back. We'll see you soon. Zen Sams.
Bye, guys.
Frank and I come back right after this to wrap it up.